Hey, Howard Jacobson here. Welcome to today's Plant Yourself podcast. A quick reminder, this podcast is free for everyone and supported by patrons. So if you would like to find out about becoming a patron of the show and helping us out, helping defray the cost, helping to spread the message, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. Thanks so much and enjoy today's episode. Hey, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howard Jacobson. Let's begin by listening to a little bit of music. Get in the mood. So, can you hear the rain beating down on the roof and walls of Sun Studios here in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, home of the Plant Yourself podcast? It's fitting that it's been raining for 12 hours. It's supposed to be raining beautifully long, strong, gentle rain for the next 3 days, because that's going to help our garden grow. We got a whole bunch of seeds in the ground yesterday, actually ran out in the rain and planted the three sisters, beans, corn, and squash this morning. And here's why it's fitting that it's raining, because today I'm talking with Mark Silver, who is the founder and head educator at Heart of Business. And just like the rain helps things grow, Mark has an approach to help small businesses grow, not to gargantuan size, but to the right size, to serve their population, to serve the mission, and to give the owner of the business a good, satisfying, heart-centered life. In fact, the tagline for Heart of Business is, every act of business can be an act of love. And I reached out to Mark now specifically for personal reason and for you guys, for the listeners. So for myself, I have been struggling in terms of what do I want my business to be, to look like. You know, I have a lot of different business partners whom I love working with: Josh Lajani, Peter Bregman, Kevin Davis, Olivia Kelly, and all the coaches that I work with. And yet I have been seduced at times by the idea of scale, by the idea of let's reach 1 million people. Let's write a book that will become a bestseller. And I've also found that I'm happiest when I'm working with a small group of people in a more modest way, but that doesn't seem to pay the bills. So looking for myself for a model that feels good, especially in this crazy capitalist economy that has so many people in so much pain. How do I make money without contributing to the very system that is destroying the planet and making so many of us miserable? And I especially wanted to talk to Mark as the pandemic grew and made it clear that business as usual was not going to be returning, and that a lot of people were going to lose their jobs, and we're going to have to figure out how to become more entrepreneurial, how to become more self-reliant, and a lot of people who may just want to leave their jobs because they want to do something with more purpose, more meaning, more of service. And so Mark's wisdom and advice is going to be invaluable for those of us who would like to contribute in an organic way to the world without suffering ourselves. So one of the things you'll hear us talk about in the conversation is what Mark calls pay from the heart pricing. And I have implemented pay from the heart pricing for my laser coaching. And one thing I learned from Mark is that you have to set a minimum. You can't just say, pay nothing, because that's not sustainable for me. And therefore, I wouldn't be able to keep doing it. I wouldn't be able to keep fulfilling my heart's desire and mission in this world. So the pay what you can pay from the heart pricing is based on a minimum of $83 a month for a full year of one-on-one private personal laser coaching with me. If you'd like to find out more about that, about getting into the best shape of your life, into reversing chronic disease, into finally taking control over your health habits, check out plantyourself.com/laser. Second, tomorrow is our first live class for the WellStart Coach Training Program, the May 2020 cohort that runs through the middle of August 2020. If you would like to become a coach or improve your coaching skills, you can check it out at wellstartcoach.com. Don't delay, because we want to get you into that first class tomorrow. And third, the gentlest reminder that this podcast is free for everyone, and it's supported by those who can afford it. So if you like the mission of the show and you are fortunate enough to have some financial resources that are a little bit extra right now, and you'd like to help me maintain the mission of the show and keep it going, you can go to plantyourself.com/gift and make a one-time or an ongoing donation to help the thing keep going. All right, so let's talk about business, heart-centered business. Without further ado, Mark Silver, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, we've been in touch and we've talked, maybe a decade ago, when I was in a totally different business, when I was in marketing, and I really looked up to your wisdom about how we can market our businesses without being yucky.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of times where I would get semi-seduced by some technique, and then, I wasn't into it enough to actually do it, and I just felt like I'm lazy or I don't have drive, and then I would read something you wrote about it and go, oh, okay, there's just this like integrity break inside my body.
Right.
And the hard part was navigating with the brakes sort of half down, like when you have the emergency brake sort of on, but you're still driving, you don't realize it.
Right. Yeah, no, it can be really challenging. And, there's a lot of interesting ideas that could be executed with integrity, but often aren't. And it can be really painful.
Yeah. So let's start by just having you describe yourself and your business and how you help people. So maybe that'll frame the kinds of questions and discussions we get into.
Sure. So Mark Silver, founder of Heart of Business, been at it for 20 years, and we help the self-employed and micro-sized businesses who want to make a difference in the world and really need to make a profit. And we have a combination of Sufi spiritual work and nitty-gritty business stuff to help people develop their businesses through what I've identified as the 3 stages of business development. And so it's been really, I feel really fortunate helping people in really profound ways begin to realize that every act of business can be an act of love.
Right. That's such a beautiful thing to remember. And such a painful thing when you realize you've forgotten it for months or years.
Well, they've kind of designed the economy that way. And so it takes some active work to call it back in.
Yeah. So can I ask you about your background? Like, how did you get into this? Were you always, Sufi and interested in business as love, or do you have some sort of backstory?
Well, I grew up in small business. So my parents ran a retail store that my grandfather had started in the 1930s in Washington, D.C. And my mom had started a few different very small businesses during our childhood. I guess just entrepreneurs, shopkeepers, really. In the family blood. And I never really liked business. I always kind of I had an activist heart, and I really didn't like the world of business for the lack of integrity that I saw there. And
what did you see? I mean, was it where were you seeing acts out of integrity?
Everywhere. So I was a punk rock activist and in the 80s, and I just saw this real profit over people. Basically.
Was that in your family business as well that you saw that tension?
No, I didn't see it in small business in the same way. I saw my parents really caring for their employees, and I saw a lot of interesting things like that, but the world really seemed held by corporate dominance, which has become even more so, and it wasn't. I was unimpressed.
Right. So I have 2 kids at home now, 20 and 24. They're both very much remind me of what you were talking about in terms of being very alienated by capitalist society, and they would like nothing better than to live in a commune where you grow your own and people are, singing and playing guitar and getting high and sort of, dropping out of this culture. What led you to being a teacher of small businesses as opposed to saying like, ugh, business, let me go be an artist or a bum or something?
Yeah. Well, I think that I was kind of drawn into it because I just didn't, it's like a life path. Like, what choice do you really have? And uh, when I'm trying not to like tell the full 20-year story because we'll be here for 20 years. But my wife had introduced me to Sufi work through a friend of hers. And when I started studying Sufism, and we were actually active in the Jewish community at the time, and I was needing some kind of deeper practice. And what I started to see, I just started to see it in my heart. I'd see some esoteric teaching and practice, and I could see where it was being mirrored, or it was the potential for being mirrored within certain business practices. And I was an activist at the time. I was working as a paramedic, and I was doing volunteer activist work, and which included running a nonprofit magazine and activist magazine. And to make the magazine work, it was essentially a small business in some ways. To have it really function and show up in the marketplace. And so it was really interesting to me to kind of see that mirroring happen. And I said, oh, it's because in my studies around economy and politics and such, commerce has existed as long as humans have been around, and I make a real distinction between commerce, human-scaled commerce, and capitalism, which is relatively new. Capitalism is a relatively new force in the last few hundred years. And it's really devastating, like the creation of the concept of the corporation, which removes individual responsibility from action, and concentrates wealth. If it talks about, because of the Industrial Revolution and the possibility of having factories as opposed to kind of hand-created, human scale things, it became possible for someone for like a single person or a single family to own the means of production, to own resources that in a way that was never really possible before. And so people coming off of family farms, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not idealizing earlier human life. There were certainly plenty of struggles. There was a lot of, struggle and pain in many, many different cultures. But this kind of consolidation of power and wealth, combining, like the end tale historically of monarchy and colonialism, combined with the rise of capitalism and the East India Tea Company and everything that kind of proceeded from that, and the force of the state behind these corporate ventures, created a situation that was just devastating. Devastating to the human heart, devastating to indigenous cultures in Europe and throughout the globe, and devastating to our way of life. And it's created this really dysfunctional, painful way of living.
Yeah. And so, but, in our culture, the people who are lionized, or at least until the last year or two, were the entrepreneurs who had these visions for like doing big things. Right. Like, and I see this, I'm in the plant-based / vegan community, and the people who are really looking to solve the world's problems are like, Memphis Meat and, Kite Hill, like they've got to grow big in order to get into all the Whole Foods and all the Krogers. Like there's something, like what's the cost of that bigness, right? You can see how, okay, well now if everyone can get plant milk instead of, having to rely on industrial agriculture, but there is a cost to growing big in the capitalist system, needing investment and dominating marketplaces. What do you see as the cost?
There's so much there. Like why like the real question is like why do they have to like why is something like and I'm not familiar with Memphis meat, but I mean
Yeah.
why like why does it have to be in every Whole Foods? Like why does it have to be like grow beyond the region? You know, it's like when you
Right.
have you ask about the cost and I think the cost um the cost is that we lose our individual creativity. You know, it's like when we try to say that there's one solution that's going to fit everywhere,
Mm.
then we're already asking the wrong question. You know, when you look at, for instance, like this was a conversation that I had with folks because when we were living in an eco village in central New York, um, where the growing season, like you can't really plant before May 15th and everything's harvested by the end of the summer. It's like it's a short growing season, very long winter. It's like, is it really, and, um, uh, small farm, individually owned animal protein, for northern climates is really sustainable way of living, and I'm not trying to turn this into kind of a vegan versus animal thing. But I'm just saying that there are like different people who grew up in the land on a landscape have developed different ways of eating, for instance. And it's kind of absurd, both from a heart perspective and a cultural perspective, to think that people are going to eat the same everywhere in the globe or everywhere in the continent. It's there we lose the resilience. Like the only thing that I think I'm kind of wanting to go in a couple different directions at once. One direction is that anyone who knows about ecosystems and knows that diversity is a really important part of the health of an ecosystem. And this is true at a human level, too. Different cultures, different languages, different ways of eating, different ways of, it's like it strengthens who we are as human beings. When we're all the same, we become much more vulnerable on a lot of different levels. And, you know, um, I just want to pause
Sure, take your time.
because even me trying to answer the question at the speed I was speaking is another piece of the puzzle, right? It's like we don't need to be in such a hurry. We often end up moving way too quickly and trying to become way too big, and um, we lose our access to guidance. We lose our access to what's true and what the little subtle signals are of where we could be going. And yeah, yeah. I don't think that I'm the adequate person to speak to the cost
Mm.
of it. I think that you would want to talk to, the Native Americans and from this continent, the cost of colonialism and capitalism and the co- and the in, to speak to the descendants of the enslaved Africans on this continent, to the cost of capitalism. I
Hmm.
mean, the only reason that the United States was able to grow historically was because of stolen land and stolen labor and genocide and the wealth that came from that was also part of mortgages funded in London and the world over, and funded this industrialization, the cotton gin, was, it's like was a self-reinforcing mechanism, and the cost has been our souls. It's been the blood
Hmm.
of millions of people. I
Right.
mean, the cost is really huge. I don't really know how to,
Uh,
um,
well,
I don't
and
know how to name it.
yeah, I guess when you look at a society that is the wealthiest the world has ever seen and the most successful, and everyone can afford a plasma TV set and 25% of us at any given time are on psych meds. Like, that's not the problem. Is not the 25% are broken, right? They're just sort of the outlet for it's a cultural illness that it's hard to see because we have so much nice stuff.
Well, and some of us have so much nice stuff, because, obviously, I mean, and I know you were just, it was a throwaway phrase, but obviously people, not everyone can have a plasma TV. There's incredible poverty in this country. It's really, yeah. And I was having this conversation with a friend earlier, and I don't want to paint the entire culture of the U.S. as, terrible and lost. There are so many good people and so many good hearts doing so many good things. It's part of why I love working with people who are self-employed and working with micro businesses, because there's so much care. And the businesses are often small enough that although survival is definitely a question, they're not pushed like public companies are, or like large companies with a large payroll are, that they can often feel freer to make choices. Like I was just speaking to somebody today who had guidance, or got really clear in themselves that, the way that I'm doing business is actually causing harm to people. I'm just going to completely scrap my business and start over. And if she had had a large business and with a large payroll, like that would have been a really hard decision to make.
Yeah.
And how much, but because it was her, she could restart and do things completely differently. And I really, I think that there is a lot of freedom and flexibility when we work with smaller units.
Yeah, it's almost like too big to bail.
Right.
Like,
right. Yes.
I'm committed to this path. So here's the real reason I wanted to talk to you was for thinking about my audience, many of whom are doing either doing things in the world that are heart-centered and supportive, mission-driven businesses. A lot of them are coaches, healthcare professionals, and given COVID-19, a lot of people's expectations and assumptions about their jobs and their careers and their security have been gutted. For a lot of people, it feels like this is a chance to remake the economy, to remake society in the way you're talking about, sort of small and local, because we've seen supply chains get messed up. Right? So I'm thinking about those folks who at the same time, a lot of them see opportunities to either rejigger their businesses to make them more heartfelt or to start practices. And at the same time, a lot of people are really hungry for money. So there's days where I'm like, maybe I should just go get a job at $15 an hour at Whole Foods and just have a paycheck, because I don't really know what my business looks like right now. What are your sort of overarching first thoughts for someone who's sort of stuck between I need some capitalist overlord to feed me versus I want to step into the space that this has created for creativity and growth?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is actually what we were just talking about, is that we are so sold on, and it's reinforced in the, TikTok, Facebook, internet culture. My boys, I have preteen boys that are on TikTok. So despite being in my 50s, I've become acquainted with TikTok. And it's like, I had no idea before that. I'm like, what is this? Anyway, it's like there's this speed that it's like, oh yeah, we're going to step into the breach. And the truth is that things take time. And I would actually encourage anyone who is hungry for money, which is a totally legitimate need in this culture. You have to have money in order to eat, which sucks, but it's true. And it's like, do what you need to care for yourself. and be like embrace, like if you're wanting to start a business or if you have a business, like you want to embrace this idea, the knowledge, the truth that it just takes time to develop a business in a sustainable manner to the point where it's really dependable. And you know, we are there is the possibility to really work with alternative methods of building businesses. It's kind of like alternative methods of building houses. If you're a big developer and you need to build a lot of things really quickly, excuse me, then there's you can't. But if it's just you and your land and you can, you know what, I'm going to try, some of these other kinds of alternative building structures that are maybe less expensive but more labor intensive. So to build a business, like what I've seen over 20 years of working with thousands of people, is that it takes, 3 or 4 years at a minimum to build a business from what we call creation into momentum. And momentum is really what's dependable, like where the business is dependable. Mm-hmm. And when you think about planting a garden, anyone who gardens knows that it takes some years for a garden to really develop and come into its fullness. The first year it's like what it is, and then you develop the soil and you support what you're doing and you learn and you tweak and you iterate and you get what's needed. It just takes time to build a relationship with the plants and with the soil. It takes time to build relationships with the ecosystem, with the communities that are going to be supporting in your business. And so if this moment is a wake-up call for folks, I really applaud it. And don't be seduced by the message of the culture that the urgency that we feel means that the answer is going to, that you're going to be able to like boom and it's there. When's the best time to plant a tree 50 years ago? When's the second best time now? It's like if you're starting to build a business, embrace the reality of what that really means. And let your heart open to that and walk with it.
Yeah, and I love to use the metaphor of gardening because, these days, a lot of people are gardening out of panic. And when I go,
not how it works.
Well, it can for a season though, right? If you have the resources, you can bring in, topsoil and compost. You can get the fertilizers. You can buy starts and seedlings. You can get a decent 1-year harvest, but it's not sustainable, right? And because
you're putting more in than you're getting out of it, and the idea is to create some kind of a balance there, where what you're putting in terms of labor. I've in reading about permaculture, I've heard that to be sustainable, if you're growing things, you want at least, like somewhere between 40 and 50 and 60% of what you're growing to actually be feeding the compost of the soil, and only harvesting, like half or less of what it is. And I think that that's a really interesting thing, because I've noticed that with business, like you do things and some of them work and some of them don't, but it's all compost. Like the things that don't work are compost, they're learnings, they're growth. And every time somebody takes a step in a different direction, like every time there's an alternative building structure, every time there's permaculture, every time, like we create a sales structure that's full of integrity and that isn't forcing people through manipulation to purchase. When we switched our business model almost entirely over to pay from the heart, where people really get to choose what they want to pay us.
Ooh, I want to ask you about that, because I've been experimenting with that with some things. And
yeah, it's like it helps to kind of like really start to shift the economy, and people go, oh, this business is thriving without manipulation and without needing to set like prices, and it starts to.
I'll tell you just one funny story. I was in South Africa in lockdown. It wasn't clear if we were going to get home. We ended up getting a U.S. government flight, but for a while, I was there with like nothing to do, except I had my good microphone. So I made a bunch of like audio guided relaxation exercises for people who are homebound and stressed out. And I thought, like, this is something that I think people could really use. I could really use the money because I'm in South Africa spending vacation money indefinitely.
Right.
And I know a lot of people have no money. So I said, pay what you can, including zero. And first 10 or 12 were all zeros. And then I started seeing people sending me messages through the money they were paying. Like somebody paid $365 for it. And I thought, oh, they're telling me something with that number.
Right.
Somebody else paid 36, which, you know, if you're from your Jewish days, that's twice 18, which
twice
is
high, right.
which is life. And like without even saying anything, like money, all of a sudden it became this love language. And it's so much. And not only did it make up for all the people paying zero, that now when people pay zero, which is still the mode, like I'm thrilled. Like, oh, someone got this who wouldn't have been able to afford it, and I hope they benefit. And it's been such a different way. And I haven't run the numbers. Like I haven't said like what's my customer acquisition cost for this, and what's the lifetime value of a pay for the heart. But just the feeling is so much cooler.
And I'll tell you, we have run the numbers because we make as much or more on a course and have way more people in it being affected and connected by what we're doing than we did before when we had set prices that were higher. And so let me ask you tactically, like for someone who's thinking about this, is it because especially these days when so many people are suffering, it feels like a very graceful thing to do, and it feels like it allows me to market harder because right. Well, because there's a generosity in there, and there's a message in there. There's also a message just in the price that brings a sense of openness. People aren't on their guard. Oh, you're trying to take all my. Oh, you're not trying to take all my money. Oh, I don't have. You're not trying to take any of my money except the money I want to give you. Like it's like there's a joyfulness that can come out. That is really wonderful. So how do you guide people? Because I've had, I've seen like Tad Hargrave, a mutual friend, has also talked about, pay what you can, but there's sometimes like people resent it. Like a guy contacted me, says, hey, I want an hour coaching session. And like, I don't know him very well, but I don't think he's raking it in right now. I said, hey, let's do it. Pay me whatever you feel like afterwards. And I think there was a lot of anxiety for him. Like, he paid $45. And part of me is going, I used to make $6,000 a day when I was a marketing consultant, and $45 for an hour. And part of me is like, oh, good. Exactly. Like, how do you guide people? Because I'm about to start a coach training program. It's been $997 for 12 weeks. And that's kind of a good number for me and for my partners. Like it's almost like if people were paying $100, it's almost like it wouldn't be worth my time. Right. How do you communicate things that both let your clients feel comfortable, like, oh yeah, I'm paying something, and that gets my needs met and my team. Yeah. Well, let me share some of the things I was sharing in a webinar I taught recently on exactly this, on how to do this in a way that actually works. Because what is often missing from these conversations is the vulnerability of the business owner, of like the needs. So from a spiritual point of view, from a Sufi point of view, like we cannot give without we are not God. We have needs. We're human beings. We may be divine expressions, but we are not the oneness in ourselves, And so I have needs. And for me to give without being transparent about what my needs are, like the client who comes to us wanting something from us is being transparent about their needs. Like I need, I'm struggling with something, you have something, I have a need, and we're not being transparent about that. I've worked with Buddhists in the past and had this conversation with them about because they were trying to operate on the Buddhist principle of dana, which is again the pay what you can, like just the gift offering to the teacher, and why wasn't really working in the culture. And I'm like, historically, my understanding is that the monks in the temple, the priests in the temple, the village temple, like the villagers knew what they needed to live. Like they knew what their needs were. And it's like, oh, we want this temple to be cared for and tended to. We want people who are going to tend to our spiritual needs. We know what they need. I'm not going to just give them, like a bowl of porridge. We're going to give them a chicken. We're going to give them all of what they need to be able to live and survive. And a lot of times the only equivalent that most people in Western culture come across is that tip jar at the cafe that people will drop a few coins into or a dollar bill into. There's no sense of, oh, what do people really need to survive, being really clear. And a lot of that's really hidden in capitalist culture too, because the things get sold for ridiculously small amounts in extremely large quantities, with a lot of profit being sucked off and people not being paid enough. And so there's just not a lot of clarity. People have individual clarity about what they need, but they don't. This is missing from the conversation.
Yeah,
I'm saying all this,
and I guess just thinking like the way restaurants do tipping has really confused everything, right? Like we are going to underpay you so drastically that you can't survive without tips. And so now this isn't, like I can tip 20%, which feels like baseline. I'll do 15 if they're an asshole. But like if they, a real tip would be like 30%, 40%, or like double, like keep the change. But like we don't what's so keep going.
Yes. So when you do our model of pay from the heart, there's a few things that need to be there. And one of the things that needs to be there is you need to be clear about what your business needs, what you need, what your business needs, what's sustainable. And to put it out there,
See, that's really hard for people because they're like, I feel guilty charging money for this. Like, let's say they're a health coach, a fitness trainer, and they know people are struggling and like, oh, I have, my here's some recipes or meal plans or whatever. Like, oh, people need this. I feel yucky to make money from it. And yet if they don't get money from it, they have to stop doing it.
But see, this is what I was saying before. There's actually needs, like the business owner has to be in a deep place of humility. Like if they're not willing to own their own needs, that they are one of the people who is needy. We are all like, need is a healthy human thing. And it's only in this culture that it gets stigmatized. They say, oh, you're needy. And that's, yeah, we're needy. Yeah, we're needy. You got to pay people a living wage. You got to care for the people. It's like people are needy. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
So I'm now starting to excavate some of my own bad programming. And there was this total thing that I bought into for a while in the internet marketing world about essentially the more needs you have, the more desperate you are and the less anyone wants. Like people only want to work with you if you have no needs whatsoever. If you're like, oh, I don't care if you work with me or not.
Yeah. Yes. And so there's a different, and it should be, it is overwhelming to take the full scope, like the full breadth of one's needs and put it on one individual customer or client. Like that's a little heavy, And so that does overwhelm people, but it doesn't overwhelm people because you're needy. It overwhelms people when they think they have to rescue you from that neediness. And so, spiritually, it's really good to acknowledge our needs and bring them to a deeper place to know that we can be cared for, and to bring a sense of desire. Like, yes, I would love to help you and I would love to support you and I'd love for you to have this and I'd love to, to bring that desire out, and to say collectively, I'm really counting on my audience to help me, on my clients to help meet my needs. But it would, not just one, like, when we do our courses, like, I don't want one person buying it for $20,000.
Right.
It's like, that would be oh, thanks. Um, you know, but when I think about from a business perspective, like, oh, this is our audience. This tends to be how many people we enroll. This tends to be how it works. This is the amount of revenue that would be really healthy and sustainable. This is the amount it breaks down to per person. This is the amount that I'm feeling like what would be sustainable, what would help us grow, what would be a minimum. And I give people guidelines so that they don't have to have that. There is so much anxiety um, about money. A lot of times when business owners step into sliding scale or pay what you want without owning their own needs, what they're doing is they're just dumping all their money anxiety onto their client. You figure it out. It's like the client doesn't know they're anxious, and I think that the anxiety comes because people genuinely want to do the right thing. I hear so many times from our people that, oh, I don't want to underpay you. I want to give more, and I have to spend time reassuring. We put it in the language, that we want to reassure people that we're really serious about this, and that we trust, and that our needs are being taken care of. And I also am really clear. Like, I'm clear, at least in my business and the model that I'm using, that we do have a minimum that we ask in any particular offer. Now, I'll say, like, this is the minimum that we're asking. This is the sustainable price. This is the minimum. And I do make exceptions. I say there is an exception. You can pay less than the minimum if paying the minimum is going to threaten your food or shelter. And especially if you live in a different economy. I was just emailing somebody who's in a completely different country, and their economy is such that, I mean, like the living, like the currency exchange, it would be absurd for them to pay anywhere near our minimum. It's like $1,500 US dollars a year is the equivalent on the currency exchange for their, for a really good. It's like, no, you don't have to pay our minimum. That would be crazy. And that would be the equivalent of me asking for, 20,000. Not really, but, and so I say, if your food and shelter is going to be threatened, if you're living in an economy that it's not on par with this, then please pay less than the minimum. And it's like, and the average, it all averages out. It all averages out. But it's true that you do need enough people, like you were saying with the sales, like the first 12 or 0 or whatever the number was, you said, you do need enough people for that to balance out. When I do individual work for my individual clients, because my business is large enough and we have these other offers, the minimum for my individual coaching is not inexpensive. It's not 0. It's not. It's higher, and that's because I'm clear that in order to continue serving the larger market, in order to continue serving the being able to deliver the kinds of offers that we do deliver that do allow for a very low minimum, when I do work with individual clients like that, has to balance out the rest of the business. So.
All right. Now, one of the mantras that I believed for a while, and I think there's, like with most things, there's some truth to it, is the idea of skin in the game, right? And so the capitalists, the entrepreneurs, internet gurus will say, like, the more you charge someone, you're really doing them a favor. Right? Tony
BS.
Robbins will charge.
BS on that one.
Tony Robbins will charge
lie.
$5,000 an hour, and so you're going to get that phobia cure.
Yeah.
Right now, I have seen that people who pay nothing very often don't even show up, don't value it. So it's not. And I don't think it's 100% BS, but help me navigate where.
I think it's BS, and the reason I think it's BS is because I've seen people pay a lot of money and not do anything. How do you explain that?
Yeah, but I don't care about that. I just got that's even easier. That's like
I I
breakage.
I don't think there's a correlation.
Uh-huh.
I think that there has to I think that people buy things that that are coming from a motivation that isn't an evaluation of like what is it that's really going to serve them. And so whether they get it for free or whether they pay money, you know, I've had people pay nothing and go full bore, and be completely committed. I've seen that too many times. I've seen people pay well below our minimum and be so committed and really follow through and get a tremendous amount out of it. I don't think the amount of money has anything to do with their level of commitment. I do think that there has to be some kind of a commitment, and this has to do with the way sales are done, right? If there is a dynamic where if something costs very little, people can make an impulse purchase and they're not really, considering it. And so maybe they're not buying it, maybe they're not following through with it. But I would, I would still say that it's not about the amount of money, it's about the purchasing process.
Mm.
It's the fact that it was a whimsical, or it was coming from a snap judgment, or it wasn't
Well,
coming from.
yeah. So what responsibility do we bear as the sellers and marketers? Because, one of the things I learned when I was doing internet marketing is how to get people so hot for the
Yes.
thing. Like, urgency. There's a countdown timer. This is the best thing ever. Let me show you these. Let me make these incredible promises to you. And right, I remember being at seeing. I don't know if you've ever been to like these conferences where people do back of the room sales, and they're so good at it, and they've got everybody stampeding to the back of the room.
Manipulation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really deep psychological manipulation happening there. It's terrible. It's wrong. It's really, really wrong. And it's causing damage.
So can you break that down a little bit? Because I'm still, I think I still have some tendrils of that need to be uprooted.
Yes. Well, I wrote a whole guide called Don't Buy Now that's on my website that really outlines a lot of the psychological manipulative tactics that get used in sales. And I wrote a different blog post about like why selling into the crowd can feel so gross, that outlines some of these things. And those kinds of manipulative sales tactics rush the purchase and take people out of their own natural purchasing decision. The truth is that, oh God, there's so much. Like I can't. If people want it, they can find it. heartofbusiness.com/don't buy now, and there's no opt-in. You just download it and leave if you don't want any more contact from us.
Are there hyphens there, or just
no?
Just
no,
don't buy now. One word.
Don't buy now. Yeah, and I want people to, because when people are aware of the manipulative tactics, then they don't get taken in by them anywhere near as easily. And I also in that guide talk about specifically what ethical pricing is in the context of business training, and I think that you can charge too much for certain kinds of things. I think that, there's so much to say here. So what you need to understand historically is that in the beginnings of the development of psychology, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, psychology started to kind of name different insights into motivation, what motivated humans. And the very first really big thing that started to happen is that big companies started to hire those people in order to sell better.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
well, that's like Edward Bernays.
That was like, all of that stuff. Like the very infancy of psychology is bound up with manipulative sales tactics in in capitalism, in corporate America. I mean, that's really was the start of some of the big advertising firms of the day, that have continued. And it's really deeply rooted in these terrible, terrible, traumatizing things that are done to get people to purchase. The truth is that people need help and they'll buy. And if you give them time and space and you show up, and there's things, there are ways to present yourself that help the purchasing decision without forcing the purchasing decision. But there's so much to say there, but it's a really painful thing. And I really advise people to really learn about those tactics so that they don't get taken in by them, and so they don't use them even accidentally. Because one of the dynamics that can happen is that it's one thing for somebody to be like a scammer who's using these manipulative tactics consciously to try to get people's money out of them, like at a carnival. But there's an even worse problem where people who are really sincere and don't intend to be manipulative, but learn these tactics because that's how it's done, and use them. And somebody who's trying to read the intention of the person can feel that they're really sincere, but may not read that the tactic itself is manipulative. And it has nothing to do with the intention of the person. And, like you mentioned urgency. Urgency is a really legitimate thing. If you have a class and it starts on a certain date and people don't sign up by that date and it starts, they miss the class. Like there's legitimate urgency. Like you have a class and it has a certain number of seats. There's legitimate urgency. It can sell out. But it needs to be used really legitimately and not like, either faked or used to push people, like that fear of losing out, like, oh, all but one are sold. Like, I will mention our deadlines when we have classes. I'll mention deadlines. If it's something that can sell out, I'll mention if it's getting close to selling out. But I'll always try to put in something saying, please don't purchase out of panic. The only thing I want the urgency to do is to kind of wake you up to the fact that if this is something you're interested in, now's the time to kind of discern whether you actually want it or not. And if you don't need it, leave it alone, walk away. You're not going to miss out on anything. You're perfect. You have what you need. If you're interested in it and it's something that you want to do, take the time to discern now whether it's true and the timing is right, because I don't want you to miss it if you do want it. That's it. So anyway, I could go on and on. This is a soapbox for me, so you got to sometimes.
Right. No, I love it, because I mean, what you're saying is like when there's real urgency, you don't want to hide that. Okay, it's starting, it's almost full, right? And so for people who have existing businesses that are successful, they've been marketing well for a while, like it's almost like, oh yeah, that's easy for them because it's true. But I'm starting out, nobody signed up for what I have. I don't have any customers, but if I say that, then no one's going to want to work with me. It's like, you drive past the restaurant with the empty parking lot, like that's another signal. So like I'm tempted sometimes to say, hurry before it sells out, when in fact there's 40 seats and like 2 people have expressed interest and nobody's given me a dime.
Right. Well, I mean, I think this is the interesting piece, right? It's like people need to be humble. Like if they're like, if you have something that has 40 seats, but you don't have a developed business or an audience that you're reaching, why do you have something that has 40 seats in it? Like if you don't have 40 people in your audience, or you don't have 100 people in your audience, or you don't have 1,000 people in your audience,
because
like why are you trying to do that?
Because I read a blog post where someone says, well, if I can sell 1,000 seats at $497, I make $1 million this year.
Right.
I ran the numbers, Mark. They work.
They do work if you have the audience. It's absolutely true. So I mean, I think it's like we have to be where we are. We have to be where we are. You know, there's always somebody bigger and there's always somebody smaller. And, you know, there are businesses that are a lot bigger and more successful than mine, and there are that a lot smaller and, you know, struggling or not struggling or whatever. But it's like you have to be where you are. And wherever you are, the humbleness is like you don't like the reason for purchasing should not be that it's going to sell out. The reason for purchasing should be that, oh, this is something that would be really helpful for me and I'd like it. And it would be kind of cool to get a chance to be in the room with only a few people with this person and to have it be kind of an intimate event and to really have the ability to interact with the person. You know, it's like when you have a small business that's very tiny, then the benefit is the intimacy. The benefit is that you're starting out and that you're not charging prices that you might charge after you've been at it for 20 years. You know, it's like you know, there's a different benefit there for the people to come to you.
Right. But it sounds like you're also say you're helping people reprogram because all of us are susceptible to social pressure.
Yes.
Right. So social proof, you know, like everybody read Cialdini Influence in you know, in my circle, in my business circle. And it's like, oh, social proof. Like, you know, you go outside, stand out and look at the sky, and then 10 people will start doing it too. And we're all sheep and we'll just follow. And you're kind of telling someone like, don't let other people's social cues influence your personal decision.
Well, I think, I mean, so what you're bringing up, social proof, again, excuse me, I've, as you know, I'm fasting for Ramadan and my mouth is getting a little dry. I'll be drinking water at 8 p.m. anyway. It's getting there.
Oh, really? Ramadan fasting is no water? I didn't realize that.
It's a complete fast from dawn until dusk.
Gosh, I have so much more respect for the people when I lived in Jerusalem who were doing that when it was like 109 degrees.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. I'm living in Harrisburg. It's 50 degrees, you know. It's like anyway, so
well, now I feel bad for having drunk in front of you.
No, please. It actually doesn't. It literally doesn't bother me. I can sit with people eating and it doesn't.
Okay.
It's my choice. It's my practice. It's like my heart. And but what I'm saying is that, so when we're talking about, so here's another example, social proof, like it is helpful for people to know, like there's some truth in that you don't want people to do it just because other people are doing it. And if the solid and interesting, one of the pieces of safety that, you know, this is one of the teachings at Heart of Business, that marketing is really about safety, not about attraction. One of the pieces of safety is that, oh, does it really work? Like, have you done this with anybody else? Like, when I was a paramedic, I was very aware that nobody wants to be the patient, like the first patient for a new paramedic, right? It's like nobody wants that. Everybody wants the veteran, you know, for good reason, right? You want somebody. And so that's why you do internships. And that's why you run with experienced medics until you have some experience. They don't just throw you out there. You know, when you're new in business, it's really wise to, whatever training you've done, you know, you do as many practice sessions as possible. You go out and you get maybe some free clients or pro bono clients, very low cost clients that you can do to create case studies, to create some, case studies and testimonials, so that one, you have some confidence in yourself being able to deliver results, and you have other people saying, yeah, this person can deliver results. They don't have to say like, you are God's gift to this thing because you're new, but you can say, yeah, I worked with him and it was solid and I got results. It was well worth the time. And that, you know, you can create that kind of social proof from a place of wanting to create safety for people to take you up on the basic offer without saying, oh my God, you know, 10 million people have done this. You're missing out if you don't, you know, if you're not one of them.
So talk more about the safety versus attraction, because I learned AIDA, right? Attraction, interest, desire, action, some form of that. So it was all about attracting the right people. And it was, the the metaphors were like, if you want to attract deer, you put out salt licks. If you want to, attract birds, you put out bird seed. But it was all about how to attract people.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, there has to be something about, the mass of people marching up and down have to notice you at some point. But I never have heard the word safety connected to marketing. So
Yes, marketing is all about safety. So like I lived in rural New York where hunting is a thing, and you can put out a salt lick and stand by it all day and no deer is coming up to you. Deer's not getting anywhere near you because it's not safe for deer to approach human beings. Um, you know, and I can walk away from the salt lick and it'll come to the salt, but then I'm nowhere near. As soon as I come by, phew, they're gone. People need safety. People need safety. It's all about safety. Attraction is the realm of love. Attraction is the realm of love. The care in your heart, the love that you bring, the desire to help people, that's the natural attraction that shows up in a transmission in the world. But people don't trust that, right? That's not enough. Because people have had their hearts broken, they've been manipulated into things. It's hard to tell if someone's genuine. Marketing is about helping people feel safe enough to approach, close enough to be able to tell, is this really for me? Is the care that I'm feeling really right? If you look at if you try to manufacture attraction, that's when it starts to feel gross, right?
that's seduction, right? That's like being being a pickup artist.
Exactly. It's gross and it's harmful, and nobody gains from that, and so yeah, marketing is really about attraction. Now, it's true that you do have to show up in front of people. And there has to be something there that people, respond to. And so you can talk about it in terms of attraction, like if the design is attractive and things look nice and it's well written. And, it's like there has to be like a presentation there that, that on an aesthetic level that can be helpful.
Yeah, but like I'm looking right now, I snuck a download of the Don't Buy Now, and I'm just sort of scrolling through it's beautiful. And I'm looking at like, here's a call out with like a thought bubble with quotes. It's like, when I look at that, I think somebody wanted to make this beautiful in the same way that like when my daughter paints a painting, her goal is I want to make art. I want to express myself.
Yes.
Like that's attractiveness as opposed to like, I've thrown things together just because I'm trying to be as efficient as possible. And they aren't that attractive.
Right. Well, we want to bring care and love to all, like every act of business can be an act of love. Like I wanted people to actually read this and gain knowledge. And so thank you for downloading it. And so I try to make it beautiful and try to make it easy for people to enter and to use. Like design is part of the message. Like it's part of how people take things in. Marketing, like so much about marketing is, we could go on for hours about this, but if people can really shift from like the mindset of, oh, I'm trying to seduce people and convince people to buy, and instead let go of the need to convince people to buy, and instead say, oh, I'm trying to find the people who really need what I have to offer. Like what I have to offer is needed or wanted by some people, not by everybody, but by some people. And I just want them to feel safe enough to be able to approach and to know that this can really help them.
Well, this is like, there is this, I think a huge need to surrender something. I'm not even sure what, but you're saying like, I don't need to convince this person at the same time as we talked earlier about I have needs, and to be able to hold both of those and to trust that, just like the blade of grass growing outside my office, it needs the sun, it needs things in the soil, it needs little buggies eating, and yet like it's all like I look outside and like nature is perfect. Like it's figured it out. But I don't feel like I'm perfect in nature. Like I need to stock up on things and I need to have, You're right. Like I need buffers
Well,
because
squirrels stock up. I mean, like it's stocking, it's like all of these things are, there's nothing necessarily wrong with some of these impulses, but we need to look at the truth behind them and where it's really coming from. It's like, and what's really true about our needs and what is really true about our desires. So much of the manipulation comes from like especially new business owners not believing that what they do can really help people, like is really needed by somebody. And that often comes up because they see there's some truth in that there are people who don't need and don't want what you have. But we then glom onto that and generalize it and say people don't need it. And if we can be humble and know that what we have is not for everybody, but there are people that we can really serve, and that those are the people that we're talking to, then we lose the need to convince. We lose the need to manipulate. We lose the need to seduce. And instead we can just connect. Like, I didn't tell you or seduce you into going and downloading that. I said something and you're like, oh, this might be useful to me. I'm curious about this. I'm going to download it, and you did. So I want, if people can, it's more than just creating something that's useful, because we also need to help people feel safe enough to approach it. And when you combine those two things, and there's a lot of details. Like these are broad strokes, right? I mean, we teach people in great detail about these things because there's a lot that goes on in business, and there's a lot there.
Yeah. Let me then segue into like, what do you, if people want those details, right? Where can they go? What do you offer, and in what order should people consume them?
So what I always recommend people do is I'd like people to start with our email list. Just come to our website, see if, hopefully I've been talking for an hour. Hopefully it resonates. Otherwise, if it didn't resonate, I hope they shut me off a long time ago. But, come and check out the website. If it resonates, subscribe to our email list, check out our stuff, make sure that it really that you like it. And then, there's a free business assessment on the site. If you go under free stuff on our site, and take the assessment, watch the video, fill out the assessment, you get a personal reply to that. And, check out what it is. Yes, we do have offers. We have a learning community, an online virtual learning community. We have courses that we teach. We do coaching. We do all those things. But, start just by just checking us out and making sure, kick the tires, see the free stuff that we have on the site, on the blog, the assessment. And then, if it resonates, then what we have is readily visible right there.
Great. So do you have resources for people who are just like looking for a gig, or like like there's, like the side hustle communities, of like, here's a thing I could do, because I know a lot of people are quite underemployed. A lot of people are at home. Like, my kids are at home now and they're trying to be creative. Like my daughter started a home kimchi business, and my son is doing beats, and like it's unclear how to monetize that for people at that level. Do you have things, or is there someplace you'd send them?
We don't do that. Like, our specialty is helping people develop sustainable businesses that are going to replace a professional level income or higher, like get people to the mid-high five figures or higher. The side hustle is not really our thing. I'm trying to think of who does that.
Well, but for someone who's like, that's the stage they're at now, and they would like to turn it, okay, I'm done. My job may go away, or I feel liberated from it, and I'm at the point where all I have is concepts of side hustle that I would like to jump into the heart of business world of high five figures serving people. Right. Like, do you have sort of roadmaps for them, or is there somewhere they should start first?
Yeah. Start with the business assessment. It teaches the stages of business development. It teaches this roadmap of what we see as the pieces. And for the side hustle, you're really going to want to get clear on the elements that are present in the first stage that I explain in that video. And that is really the place to start. And yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
that's where I would start.
Great, thanks. And just over the past 2 months in the pandemic time, is there anything you've seen from your community, from your clients, that's sort
Yes.
of new and interesting?
I see, we have somebody in our community who's an acupuncturist. Her practice is entirely in person, and she, in with great creativity, created something where, and she also does some energy healing, but she started seeing clients virtually. She mails them a little kind of like micro needle kit. I didn't get the full details on it, but she can assess and treat people virtually and do the energy healing virtually, and it's working. And she has a flow of weekly clients, and she's like, "Oh my God, it works! I can't believe this." So we've seen a number of clients like that come up with really creative, innovative approaches to um, meeting their clients' needs in this situation, and seeing their, like getting clients and seeing their businesses continue to sustain themselves.
Hmm.
It's fun. It's
Uh,
fun and creative. And I'm not, there are, I say it's fun. I want to bring some joy to it. I know there's a lot of people suffering and there's really hard times, but there is hope and there are ways forward. So,
right. I mean,
Sean.
one of the feelings I had, like I'm doing a lot of permaculture. I'm exploring, business models. Like until like 3 months ago, my business partner and I were trying to switch everything from online to in person, just because it felt so much more like talk about irony.
Oops.
It felt so much more nourishing. We were doing like in person retreats, but it's almost like okay, so where we're living is not sustainable. Like capitalism, the way we're eating the planet, the way we're having all this, resource inequality, and what each of us can do, maybe, or some of us can do, if we're privileged to be in a position to do it, is to explore what happens next. Like we're all like mutating, and like what would business look like in a
Hmm.
different world, and none of us knows. But if we all try things, like
Right.
it's like you said, instead of us becoming commodities, like we all have to do it the same way. If we each tune into our own guidance, take instruction, and see models from people like you who have experience in it, but ultimately make our own new thing. So like it's
Right.
like every seed comes up with a slightly different plant. Then whatever happens, we'll have the diversity and the resilience that we'll have new models.
Yes. And I want to also just to add to that piece that the new models are not going to be complicated or sophisticated. Like there doesn't like I don't know if it really will be a quote unquote new model. I think like the very basics of human commerce is that I have something, what do you got? you
Yeah.
know and then it's like and there's always been some form of indirect exchange used as a currency, and I think that a lot of what needs to be done is to take a lot of the sophistication out of our models and make them simpler and more human scaled, because it's really very simple. um, you have something you need, and so, you have something somebody else needs, they have something you need, or if it's indirect current, they have some currency that can be used with somebody else. I
Mm.
I think there can be a lot of creativity and innovation in terms of the care that we bring to it and the beauty and the love that we bring to it and how we do it. But the analogy I use is like, the human face. You know, the vast majority of us, two eyes, nose, mouth, two ears, it's like there's not really a lot of variation in the structure, but everybody is uniquely beautiful. And we have that ability with our businesses to not have to get extreme with the a difference in structure, and instead bring the love and the care to how we express it and let the creativity come out that way.
It's almost like instead of, I have to be better than anybody else or I have to be hyper competitive, it's simply that like every dollar bill is just functionally the same, but I am utterly unique in the history of the universe. And therefore, there's no amount of dollar bills that can afford me. Right? That's not the equation we're working with here.
Right. That's not the equation. Right.
Oh, beautiful. So tell us again where people can find you. Say the website again.
Heartofbusiness.com. heartofbusiness.com. And we have an active Facebook page. We have a slightly growing YouTube channel, but the website is the main place to come to.
Beautiful. Mark, thank you so much. Thanks for the work you do. Thanks for I feel like I got a stealth-free consultation here.
I'm really delighted. And it's just, I love the heart and the care and the perspective that you bring. We really, this was a really nourishing conversation for me with you.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of everyone who listens to this and feels like mental obstacles, emotional, psychological obstacles have been, obliterated to create a heart-centered path forward, I thank you on their behalf as well.
MashaAllah. I'm very, very delighted.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Peace.
Oh, boy, I hope you found that as useful as I already have. You can see I recorded it a couple of weeks ago, and I've already implemented big changes in my business based on it. Not just the strategies, but really the engine of the philosophy of my business feels so much better to align it with my heart. And it's so easy when you're looking at spreadsheet, to start a business with, I want to serve, I want to be in connection with people in this way. But then when you get spreadsheets and you start reading about strategy, it's so easy for me, at least, to tip over into, all right, what am I going to do here? What are the tactics here? And to let the business drive me rather than the vision of my service in the world and the connections that I want with people inform the business. So this is a mantra that I am adopting, and I have to keep reminding myself that every act of business can be an act of love. So I hope you feel the love in the podcast. And I hope if when you don't feel the love, if I start doing things that you feel are getting me off track, which I'm sure I will, that you'll gently and kindly and firmly let me know. Help me hold myself accountable. So one other pay from the heart thing that I am exploring is for people who can't afford the laser coaching, even at $83 a month, the rock bottom pay from the heart price that works for me, is I'm looking at putting together a group, and it would meet at Wednesdays 1 p.m. Eastern time, so 10 a.m. Pacific time, and like 6 or 7 p.m. in Europe, and it would be a group coaching call. And the pay what you can there would be a minimum of $15 a month and a suggested of $50 a month. So anywhere between $15 and $50, or if you want to pay more and subsidize and provide scholarships for people who can't even do the $15. If you're interested in that, just drop me a line, hj@plantyourself.com, or just go to plantyourself.com, find this episode, and leave a comment. If I can get 10 people to commit to participating in this, I'll start it up. And group coaching, I used to think of it as poor man's coaching, but actually through my work with Big Change Program, Sick to Fit, and Well Start, there are ways in which group coaching could actually be more powerful because of the nature of community and because of the nature of accountability. And even when it's not your issue, it kind of is your issue. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I will gauge the temperature of my audience and see whether that's something that I want to start offering on a provisional experimental basis. So this episode is 408. If you would like to check out the show notes for this episode and find Mark on Facebook and find his website and download his free, you don't even need to give him your email PDF. you can do so. You can check it all out at plantyourself.com/408. In garden news, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of rain this week. Well, we've put a lot of things in the ground. And when I say we, again, I mean mostly Mia. I'm doing the hauling, and she's doing the intelligent work, the design, and the strategy for how we're going to grow food. And we're looking forward to growing a lot more food this year and becoming more involved in the community and community resilience as we've seen the food supply break down, the supply chain break down with animal agriculture in particular, but with sort of global industrialized food. Getting back to local feels important, and so that's our mission as we continue there. Running news, man, on Sunday, I went out to do 6 miles, and I kept running into running friends who were just starting their runs. I ended up doing 11, came back, and I pretty much slept all day yesterday. I was like in bed doing editing, but man, was I exhausted. So clearly bit off more than I can chew. Yesterday, did nothing. Today is pouring rain, so I'm probably going to do some rowing and calisthenics, maybe some yoga, and get back into it slowly that way. All right, so thanks to Will Ridenhour for allowing me to use Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. Check out willridenhour.com for more of his beautiful Kora music. And last and most, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons, as in Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Morrow, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Burns, Christine Nielsen, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Isaac, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, Kara Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Bellin, Gila Lacerte, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburk, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lennis, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Steph, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Julian Watkins, Brito O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Home Hedegaard, Isa Susan Watt, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Lisa Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justine Devitt, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan McCorney, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Karts, DM Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Moulton, Tricia Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunn-Marie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Param Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owens, and Sagar Naik for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for today. As always, be well, my friends. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenhour for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenhour.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Mr. Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby, hi Janet, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lacerte, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Ruth Ann Funderburk, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, The Equally Mysterious, Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch of Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Copel, Julian Watkins, Brito O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Izatu Zinwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divich, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paran Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, and Michael Lushton for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.